Welcome to the Depth Dive. Today we're jumping into Power BI, that big business analytics tool from Microsoft. But we're looking at it from a really practical angle. Interview questions. We've got this collection of sources, basically lists of questions used to check out Power BI candidates um, at all sorts of levels, beginner, intermediate, advanced. So our mission here is to kind of unpack these questions, not just find the right answer, but really understand what these questions tell us about the skills and ideas that are key in Power BI. Think of it like a shortcut, maybe, to understanding the tool and what you need to know, whether you're hiring, learning, or just, curious.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how these questions, the way they're structured in the sources, they really map onto the different levels of, well, expertise in Power BI. You see this clear path, like starting with basic definitions, then getting into deeper data stuff, and finally strategy. It kind of lays out the journey.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting right at the beginning, the questions for, say, junior or entry-level folks. The list starts super basic. So based on these sources, what's like the simplest way to explain Power BI?
Well, the list frames it first as an enterprise Microsoft app for business analytics. Simple enough. Its main job, taking all sorts of different data sources, maybe messy ones, and turning them into structured data you can actually understand and get insights from, making data useful and easy to look at, basically.
Okay. And what about the big selling points? What benefits do these beginner questions focus on?
They really hit on data visualization, making charts that make sense. Also, handling quick queries, especially from Excel, making reports easy to generate, and doing a pretty precise analysis, getting insights relatively fast.
But no tool's perfect, right? What downsides pop up even at this level?
The sources mention things like file size limits, sometimes, max 1 GB for certain things. Also, real-time connections aren't always straightforward for every data source, and data cleaning. Sometimes not the easiest thing inside Power BI itself.
Right, sets the stage for tools like Power Query later, I guess.
Exactly. It gives you the strengths and the practical limits right away.
So knowing the tool, the basics, who actually uses it? What roles come up?
The list points to business owners, business developers, and business analysts as key users, and the questions hint at how they use it differently. Analysts often build things, owners consume the reports, developers might integrate it elsewhere.
Makes sense. Okay, getting into actions. Get data. Sounds obvious, but why ask it?
It's step one. It's just the feature you use to connect and import data from wherever it lives. Asking it just confirms, the very first thing you need to do. Simple, but necessary.
Now, this is interesting. The source actually throws in a comparison to Tableau right at the beginner level. What differences does it highlight?
Yeah, that's telling. It positions Tableau as maybe better for really huge data sets, sometimes a more complex interface, good for experts, very cloud-focused. Power BI, in contrast, is shown as great for, let's say, small to medium data, simpler interface, good for beginners and experts, maybe less cloud-native in some aspects, according to this specific comparison point.
So it situates Power BI in the market early on.
Exactly. Tells you who they think it's for.
Okay, moving past just getting data in. Calculations, what's DAX?
Right. DAX stands for Data Analysis Expressions. It's the formula language you use for calculations and analysis, mainly inside the Power Pivot engine that runs under the hood. You use it for calculated columns, measures, that sort of thing.
And is there a key DAX function even beginners need to grasp?
Absolutely. The calculate function comes up. The source says it's for getting totals, but
Right.
crucially, for evaluating expressions in a modified filter context.
Modified filter context.
Yeah, that's the key bit. It lets you change how filters apply just for that one calculation. So you can, say, get total sales for just one product, even if the user has filtered the report for something else. It's fundamental for complex analysis.
Got it. Filters themselves are obviously key. What's their main job?
Simply put, separating out the data you need based on rules you set. The sources mention different types, auto, manual, and interactive ones like drill down, drill through, URL filters. Lots of ways to slice the data.
And where do you build all this? There's Power BI Desktop and the Power BI Service. What's the difference?
Power BI Desktop is the free app you download. That's where you do the main work, connecting, cleaning, modeling, building the reports. The service is the cloud part, where you publish, share, and view those reports and dashboards.
So desktop is the workshop.
Pretty much. That's where most of the creation happens before you push it out.
In getting data into desktop, the source lists 3 main connectivity modes.
Yeah. Direct query, live connection, and import. Sometimes called SQL Server import in the source, but import is the general term. Direct query keeps data at the source, mostly. Live connection hits specific things like analysis services directly. Import, well, it pulls the data into the Power BI model. It usually supports the most data sources.
And before modeling, there's often cleaning involved. Power Query's role.
Crucial role. Power Query is the engine, often inside desktop, for importing, cleaning, and transforming data. You pull data in, use Power Query's tools to fix it, shape it, then load it into your model. It tackles that data messiness issue we mentioned earlier.
What if the standard charts aren't enough? Can you add your own visuals?
You can. That's where custom visuals come in. They're like little packages of code, often JavaScript, that add new chart types or visual elements. You can import them.
Okay, back to modeling for a sec. Power BI Desktop versus the older Power Pivot in Excel. What's the upgrade?
The source points out Power Pivot was mainly import single-direction relationships. Desktop added key stuff like two-way relationships between tables, which is huge for how filters work. Plus, it bundles Power Query and Power Pivot together and has better visuals. It's more integrated.
And once it's all built, you often use a dashboard. What defines a Power BI dashboard?
The source describes it as that single-page view, telling a story with key bits of data. You pin visuals from different reports onto it to get that high-level overview. Quick access to the underlying reports, too.
What kinds of databases can it connect to? The list is pretty long.
Yeah, it mentions common ones: Access, Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, Teradata, PostgreSQL. Shows it's pretty flexible.
In the model, relationships between tables are key. Manual versus automatic.
Manual means you explicitly tell Power BI how tables connect using keys. Automatic is Power BI trying to guess the relationships based on column names. Usually you want to be explicit, but auto can be a starting point.
And there's a detail about relationships in Power Pivot models. Only one active one.
Right, that's a common point. Between any two tables, only one relationship can be active at a time, the solid line. You can have others, but they're inactive dotted lines, unless you specifically activate them in a DAX measure, using functions like useRelationship. It forces you to think about your model design.
Okay, wrapping up the beginner stuff. It's not just about clicking buttons, is it? What skills are needed?
No, definitely not. The source lists analytical skills, technical know-how, understanding algorithms a bit, some coding basics maybe, numerical reasoning, math skills, and crucially, understanding business intelligence principles.
So even for entry level, it's a mix.
It really is. It's technical ability plus that analytical and business sense. You need to understand the why behind the data.
Okay, let's level up. Intermediate. Candidates with maybe a few years under their belt. The questions get more specific now. First off, when you publish stuff, where does the data actually live?
Generally, it's in the cloud, usually Microsoft Azure. The sources mention things like Azure Blob Storage or Azure SQL Database as common back-end storage options used with Power BI.
And what features become critical at this level, according to the questions?
It moves beyond just making charts. Now it's about easily sharing those visuals, getting that omni view, seeing data from lots of sources together, and making sure reports work well on different devices. Usability and sharing become key.
We talked DAX basics. How does it get deeper for intermediates?
The focus shifts to understanding the core concepts. Three big ones highlighted are context. The difference between row context and filter context is huge. Then functions, not just knowing they exist, but understanding categories, arguments, and syntax, really knowing the rules and how to debug errors.
That context piece sounds like the big hurdle.
It often is. Getting your head around how context affects calculations is probably the biggest leap in mastering DAX.
Custom visuals came up. When would you really need them?
When the built-in stuff just doesn't cut it for your specific need, maybe a unique chart type or specific company branding. The source even suggests you might need to hire a developer if you can't find or build what you need.
Data types. Seems basic, but why is it an intermediate topic?
Well, the source lists the standard types: text, Boolean, number, datetime. But understanding them is crucial because while Power BI tries to convert types automatically sometimes, mismatches cause errors.
Right, like trying to do math on a text field?
Exactly. Or using a date function on something that isn't a date. It breaks things. So data integrity and correct typing are vital.
How about grouping data visually in desktop?
Simple trick, but useful. Treadle plus click items, right-click, group. Good for organizing visuals or data points. And the source notes it's easy to change groups later, too.
Okay, here's a more technical one. Query folding. What's that about?
Query folding. Super important for performance. It happens in Power Query. It means Power Query tries to translate your transformation steps like filtering or sorting into the source system's language, like SQL.
So the work happens before the data gets to Power BI.
Precisely. If the source database can do the filtering, Power Query tells it to do so. This means less data travels over the network, and Power BI processes less, making refreshes way faster. It's a huge optimization.
Filters, slicers. What's a slicer specifically? And responsive.
A slicer is just a visual filter right on the report page. Lets users click buttons or lists to filter the report interactively. Responsive usually means the slicer, like other visuals, adjusts its size and layout automatically to fit different screen sizes. Phones, tablets, desktops, makes reports usable everywhere.
What about packaging things up? What's a content pack?
The source describes it as a bundle of related Power BI items, reports, datasets, maybe dashboards. It's a way to share a pre-built set of analyses or a starting point with a team easily, sort of like a template package.
Security is always key. Row security. What does that mean?
Row-level security, or RLS. It lets you control data access based on the user, right down to the individual row of data.
So two people see the same report but different data.
Exactly. User A might see sales for their region only. User B sees theirs, based on rules you define, often tied to their login. Essential for data governance.
The Power Query Editor, what kind of functions does it handle? The list is long.
Oh yeah, it's the powerhouse for data prep. Importing, managing parameters, working with columns and rows, adding, removing, splitting, merging, renaming, replacing values, even running R or Python scripts for complex stuff.
Why bother with general data formatting?
Consistency, mainly. Makes data easier to categorize, spot issues, and just work with reliably across your model and reports. Basic data hygiene.
Back to DAX and data types. Does it always convert types smoothly?
It tries. The source says it often converts automatically, like text 123 to the number 123. But this is key. If a function needs a date and you give a text like hello, it's not going to work. Automatic conversion has limits. Errors will happen if types are fundamentally incompatible.
We mentioned DAX. Is there another language involved? M language?
Yep, M. That's the language behind Power Query, sometimes called the mashup language. While DAX is for calculations in the model, M is for all the data shaping, cleaning, and combining steps before the data gets loaded.
So M for Power Query transformations, DAX for model calculations.
You got it. Two different languages for two different stages.
How well do Excel and Power BI play together?
Very well, according to the source. You can use Excel files as data sources, upload workbooks directly to the Power BI service, share reports based on Excel data. They're definitely designed to be compatible.
How about something practical? Setting up dynamic filtering.
The source outlines steps. Get your data set up, publish the report, create a filter link or parameter, use a DAX calculated column to define the filterable values dynamically, then test and publish.
What makes it dynamic?
It means the filter choices aren't static. They can change based on user input, maybe another selection or data context, giving users more flexible ways to explore.
The bookmark feature, what does that save?
Bookmarks capture the current state of a report. Page filters, slicers, visual selections, sort orders, drill locations, everything. Lets you save specific views or analysis paths and easily return to them or share them. Super handy.
And the selection pane, when is that useful?
It lists every single object on your report page. Visuals, shapes, text boxes. Really useful on complex pages to select hidden items, change layering order, or temporarily hide things while you work on layout. Good for organization and debugging.
Performance again. Incremental refresh. What's the goal?
Speeding up data refreshes for large data sets. Instead of reloading everything, you set it up to only refresh data that's changed or is recent based on date partitions usually.
Why is that important?
Because refreshing huge tables takes time and resources. Incremental refresh focuses only on the new or updated slice, making the process much faster and more efficient. Crucial for large enterprise models.
Sharing outside Power BI often uses an embed code. What is it?
It's just a code snippet Power BI generates. You use it to embed your Power BI report or visual directly into another website, portal, or application. Makes the insights available where users already are.
And finally, some basic but essential text functions. LTRI versus RTRIM.
Simple ones. LTRIM removes spaces from the left side, leading spaces of a text string. RTRIM removes spaces from the right side, trailing spaces. Standard data cleaning functions.
Right, cleaning up messy text inputs.
Exactly. Common step in Power Query.
Okay, on to the advanced candidates. People with really solid experience. These questions dig into architecture, deeper concepts, strategy. 10 questions here, filters again, but now at an advanced level, 3 main types in reports.
Yeah, it's about scope. Report-level filters. They apply to every page in the report. Page-level filters apply only to the specific page they're on. And visual-level filters apply only to the single visual they're attached to. Understanding this hierarchy is key for controlling user experience and sometimes performance.
Power map for geographical visuals. What data does it need?
These geographical data points, obviously, things like city names, country, state, postal codes, latitude, longitude in your data set, it needs that to plot things on a map.
What about the overall workflow when using Power BI? The source lists key stages.
It breaks it down into three phases. Integrating, which is connecting to sources, extracting data, processing, cleaning data, fixing errors, handling missing values. That's the Power Query stage mostly. And presenting, building the visualizations, charts, reports, dashboards to display the data, get, clean, show.
SSBI comes up again, self-service business intelligence. What's the core idea here?
It's about empowering end users, giving business analysts, maybe even power users, the tools like Power BI to do their own data analysis and reporting without needing deep coding skills or relying heavily on IT departments.
So it democratizes data analysis in a way.
That's the idea, lowering the barrier to entry so more people can get insights from data directly. It's a big shift from traditional IT-led BI.
Back to DAX modeling. Calculated columns versus calculated tables. They sound alike, but what's the difference in use?
Calculated columns add a new column to an existing table based on a DAX formula, useful for row-by-row calculations or deriving new attributes. Calculated tables create entirely new tables based on a DAX formula. The source notes they're useful for creating intermediate tables for complex calculations, maybe summarizing data, or creating tables you don't necessarily want exposed directly in the final model, but need for other measures.
KPIs, key performance indicators. How are they used in Power BI?
They're specific visuals designed to track progress towards a goal. You set a target value, see the actual value, and often define thresholds, like red, yellow, green, to give a quick visual status check on performance against that target. Very common in business dashboards.
Gateways. Needed for on-premises data. What types are mentioned?
Two main modes. On-premises data gateway, standard mode. This allows multiple users in an organization to connect to shared on-premises data sources for scheduled refreshes. And the personal mode gateway, this is just for one individual user to connect to their own local data sources, less common in enterprise settings.
And why are they needed at all?
They act as a secure bridge. Power BI is a cloud service, but lots of company data is still inside their private network. The gateway sits inside the network and securely relays queries and data between the Power BI service in the cloud and the on-premises data source. Without it, the cloud service can't reach that internal data.
So SSBI versus managed enterprise BI, what are the key differences highlighted?
The source contrasts them. SSBI is seen as enabling easier data integration, less need for third-party help, less coding needed by users. Managed BI is presented as potentially more complex for analysis due to structure and time, often involving third-party vendors, and traditionally requiring users with strong coding or technical skills.
So trade-offs between user empowerment and centralized control complexity.
That's a good way to put it. SSBI focuses on user agility. Managed BI often emphasizes governance and scale, though the lines are blurring now.
Last comparison, MSBI versus Power BI within the Microsoft world.
This comparison in the source differentiates them on a few points. It suggests MSBI, older SQL Server tools, handles massive data better, while Power BI has a file limit, though this ignores premium capacity. It also says MSBI is less cloud-oriented, whereas Power BI can readily pull from cloud sources. And output-wise, MSBI produces reports visuals, while Power BI creates models, dashboards, and reports.
So Power BI is positioned as more modern, cloud-friendly, and broader in output.
Based on this source's specific points, yes. It emphasizes Power BI's cloud integration and dashboarding capabilities more, though again, comparing specific features needs context like licensing and versions.
Okay. We've walked through beginner, intermediate, advanced questions. Stepping back, what does this whole list tell us about evaluating someone or just understanding Power BI's depth?
Well, the source itself says these questions come after skills tests, right? During the interview. They're meant to probe understanding and strength.
And they really cover that mix of skills mentioned early on, analytical, technical, business knowledge.
Totally. You see the progression clearly. It starts with define this term, moves to explain this process like dynamic filtering or incremental refresh. Then it gets into compare these complex concepts like calculated columns versus tables or SSBI versus managed BI. And finally, understand the architecture, gateways, connectivity. It tests knowing the what and the why.
Wow, yeah, that was quite the deep dive. Just by looking at the questions themselves, covered everything from get data basics up to the complex DEX, gateways, SSBI.
And understanding these concepts, whether you're hiring someone or learning it yourself, really paints a much clearer picture of what Power BI can do, where its complexities lie, and sort of the ladder of skills involved.
So what's the takeaway for you, the listener, this list of questions? It's basically a roadmap for the Power BI skill set. It shows the path from just understanding charts and basic functions all the way up to mastering data modeling, optimizing queries, handling security, and knowing the architecture. It lays out the learning journey.
Which actually raises a really interesting point. If these questions reflect current best practices, but Power BI is constantly evolving, always adding new features, how well does just knowing the answers to today's questions prepare someone for the challenges and changes that will inevitably come tomorrow? What other ways, beyond reciting these definitions, could someone show they're adaptable and can solve problems they haven't seen before in Power BI?
That's definitely something to think about as you continue your own deep dive into data and business intelligence. Thanks for joining us.